think we should start. We have we have 55 screens and we have 7:30. So let's make a start. So good evening, everybody. Shalom Obracha. Welcome to this joint um, questions and answers pre-Pesach inspiration with Dayan Berger, with our partners Yeshurun Shul and Yavna School. And the format for the evening is we're going to introduce the Dayan, who's then going to say a few words of chizuk, inspiration to us, and then we're going to have some questions. Some of the questions will be read out. We've had quite a lot of questions submitted, and some of the questions we will open the floor for people to ask the questions as it were live. So it gives us great pleasure to ask Dayan Berger to speak to us this evening. Can I say this is probably the first public opportunity we've had for quite a long time to thank Dayan Berger on behalf of particularly at Steen Court for his constant being available for dealing with the many questions that we've had, especially during the course of the last year, which as everybody knows has been very trying. And Dayan Berger is the authority behind the way in which we've been able to keep the shul open as long as it's been legally possible to do so. He's advised us. The only thing is we've missed having him in shul. I mean, Yitz Hashem, please God soon that he should once again join us. Davening, you're very welcome to be in your regular place as soon as that's possible to be with us in shul. We know that your expertise in Shulchan Aruch, in all the areas of Shulchan Aruch and Choshen Mishpat, and your many roles are based in here for many years, and we've appreciated it and we continue to appreciate. So thank you, Dayan Berger, for that and for all that you do for our community on a regular basis behind the scenes. So it now gives me great pleasure to ask Dayan Berger to say a few words to us before questions are put.
Thank you. First, the pleasure, let me assure you, is entirely mine. I sorely missed my minion, the 8:15 minion in the morning. I sorely missed saying sliches, making a siyum last Erev Pesach. But well, that's how Rabbeinu Shalom wants it. And thank God we are still here, we're still around, and we're still eager to continue. Let me say to you, ladies and gentlemen, I believe the current Pesach is unique. And I'll tell you why I regard this as unique. Every year, we say by the Seder, B'chol shona v'shona, chayav odom liros es atzmoi ki li yotzim mitzrayim. Every year, man has got to imagine himself as if he himself had been enslaved in Egypt and is just on the night of Pesach being redeemed and does Yetzias Mitzrayim. And I find it exceedingly difficult to imagine. Had a lovely, cozy winter, might have visited Eretz Yisrael once or twice in the course of the winter, and they're slowly emerging out of hibernation for Pesach. But to say you feel like you've been enslaved in Egypt and suddenly got out of it, difficult to imagine. I try my best, but it's difficult. This year, it is ever so real. We have had an awful year, literally awful year of being cocooned, arrested, if you like, house arrest throughout the year. Missed our friends, missed our loved ones, missed our Einiklech. They couldn't go, they couldn't come. The rules confused us. 2 to a household, 1 household, 1 from 2 households, 2 from 1 household. It was awful. And now, Baruch Hashem, we see the light at the end of the tunnel. We see us emerging for this Mitzrayim, in Hashem, more or less during Pesach, and more so during the course of the summer. And this sudden change from arrest into freedom, from restriction into openness, is capable of unleashing a massive tsunami of kinetic spiritual power. The eagerness to start afresh, to go to minyanim, to attend shiurim, to participate in learning is such that is literally infectious. And very much like the Yetzias Mitzrayim led us to Kabbalah HaTorah, I very much expect that this year's year 2021 Yetzias Mitzrayim will lead us to a renewed effort in everything communal, in everything spiritual, and in everything temporal as well. I think the economy will bounce far further and quicker than anyone expected. Shuls will bounce back, new members will join, and I am an optimist by nature. But I'll tell you, my track record is that about 86% of the times I'm right. I'm highly optimistic for the coming year and for the coming summer. And please God, I think I will not disappoint you. Having said that, let's go down to Tachlis. Let's see the Shilas.
Thank you, Dan Berger. I'm now going to hand over. Thank you for that very inspiring message. We've just had, I've just been told about the Mazel Tov to Rabbi Bank and his wife Hannah on the birth of a son last night or this morning. And we wish you, on behalf of everybody, Mazel Tov. Of course, Hannah was grown up at Steen Court. She grew up at Steen Court and won the Margot Brody Award. So it's wonderful to see a Mazel Tov to everybody, and to Nick and Bev and the other grandparents, which I don't know, but Mazel Tov to everybody. And now over to Rabbi Cohen.
First, let me first join in the Mazel Tov. I never had the pleasure of meeting Rabbi
Banks.
Rabbi Banks, never met him before, but since he holds a certificate of the chief rabbi, he must be a man of learning and of good deeds. And I join everyone in wishing him a Mazel Tov, and may he and his wife stand under the chuppah of this youngster with good health and with gesund. Mazel Tov, Rabbi Banks. Rabbi Banks, you're muted. You better unmute.
Oh, mine. Thank you for the bracha. Bezrat Hashem will get to meet you soon.
As I said, I'm 86% right. I think I'll be right on this one as well.
Bezrat Hashem.
Rabbi Cohen.
Thank you. Okay, the first question we've got this evening, Dayan, reads as follows. I saw an announcement by the Manchester Based Inn that I should buy a new oven, ideally for Pesach, and if not, I have to disassemble all the pieces in order to kasher the oven.
Yeah.
Can I not just kasher the oven by cleaning it and putting it on high for 40 minutes?
Now, the answer is no, not for Pesach, and I'll explain the difference. Throughout the year, we've got the rules of what we call bittul berov. Small amounts of forbidden food are disregarded. A little drop falls into a pot, and a little drop of milk falls into a top of soup. If it's more than 60, 1 in 60, and so on, it is disregarded. But not for Pesach. Pesach b'mashu. Chometz b'Pesach b'mashu. Even the smallest amount is deemed to, this at least for our halacha, the Ashkenazim, is deemed to puzzle and to create a problem and to render everything inedible. Therefore, an oven, by its very nature, has got nooks and crannies all over the place, and it is literally impossible to ensure that there's not a mashu unless you disassemble it, take it apart as the Bethany rules, clean it thoroughly with caustic soda, whatever, and then reassemble it. So I very much regret there is no shortcut for an oven on Pesach. But let me give you some practical advice. One needn't buy a whole new oven for Pesach. You can buy smallish electric ovens. I know of a Bell oven, which costs well under £100, and they do a perfect job. If not, my Zayda and Bobbe didn't have an oven for Pesach, so they baked in such baking tins. They used to call them Wundertop, and that's a marvel baking. And they fry the chickens on top of the gas. So by all means, Baruch Hashem, we can afford now to have ovens, but you needn't buy an oven, a fitted oven. You've got these more. In fact, I had a number of them, and they serve beautifully. But regrettably, there's no shortcuts. You've got to disassemble them to ensure there's not a mashru chometz there.
Right, Skoyach for that. Thank you. Next question is, can oat matzah made from oats, can that be used in order to fulfill the mitzvah of achilas matzah on Seder night? And if not, if you can't be yaitza for that on Seder night, what bracha would you make? Would you say hamoitzi over such matzah?
Well, this is indeed a loaded question. Now, and then let me explain the background to it. We know there are five grains, 5 types of grains. And we know the names in Hebrew. We know wheat and we know barley. Then there are 3 more grains. One of them is Sheboiles Shual, which is a fox's grain. That's the literal translation. It is not clear what it is, because in the Gemara's time, they didn't have Latin names for these grains, and nobody is absolutely sure. But the perceived wisdom is that it is oats. I forgot what the Latin name is, savita or something, whatever, it's oats. And if it is one of the 5 grains, then you say hamotzi on it, and you can yoitze with it a matzah on Pesach. However, there is some scientific research that indicates that this kind of grain was not prevalent in the Middle East in the Mishnah time. It only came from the Kafkaz or the Caucasus much later. And a certain professor, he said, no, that's not Sheboiles Shul, and Sheboiles Shul is something else altogether. And the famous Poisek, Reb Shloime Zalman, examined his work, and he started worrying about it. And he ate oats for breakfast, and he used to make on them mezonis. But since that professor said it's not the one that referred to the Mishnah, he started saying shahakol on it. And he came to, the information came to Rabbi Elyashiv Zechron Livrocha. Rabbi Elyashiv got very annoyed, and he sent him back a message. Shloime Zalman, the Chaverim, they learned together in Eitz Chaim Yeshiva. We have had a tradition of hundreds of years regarding oats as Sheboiles Shul. And just because of an opinion of one professor, you want to change the tradition? And as whether Reb Shloime Zalman heeded his advice or not, I don't know. But there is a slight controversy about the identity of oats as Sheboiles Shul. Now, for people who have no choice, they're celiacs and they can't tolerate any whatever, they have got definitely, they can use it and they can make a moitzi, because that has been our tradition for at least a few hundred years. Anybody else who can avoid it or eat it betoch hasud and not on Pesach, well and good, because the identity of it as Sheboiles Shul is not absolutely clear. But we are traditional people, and if this is a tradition, never mind scientific advice. If this has been the tradition, and I believe it is widely accepted that celiacs use oats for matzah, then let them carry on to do so, and let them make hamoitzi, and let them make alachilas matzah, and please them, and let them have a refuah shleima b'korov.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Regarding Erev Pesach, especially this year with it being on Shabbos, is it better to use egg matzah or to use challah for like a mishnah to eat outside? So egg matzah inside, or to go outside and eat challah and worry about the crumbs? Which one's better to eat before Pesach?
Now, logic would indicate that it's far better. Let me first say, what's the status of egg matzah? Egg matzah is something that Ashkenazi Jews don't use for Pesach. I'm not going into the background as to why that is so, but that's a halacha man Ashkenazim. We don't eat egg matzah on Pesach. However, we can keep egg matzah over Pesach. You don't have to sell it in chometz, obviously, provided it was with the hechsher kosher Pesach, as far as the hechsher kosher Pesach. So therefore, logic would indicate that, of course, it's much easier to eat egg matzah. You don't have to worry about the crumbs. And then when it comes to Isra Achilas Chometz, you pack it up, and you don't have to flush it down the toilet. You pack it up and keep it for after Pesach. And with the Eved, if a little child wants to eat it or needs to eat a biscuit or something, with the Eved, you can give ktanim. That's what the Ramo says. However, interesting, since the tradition has not been so, my Zayda, my grand-Zayda, my grand-grand-Zayda never thought of egg matzahs. And they never tried with little chalalach of chometz, tried to eat it up if they could, and if not, then the heartache of flushing it down the toilet, a shine of putting it into a neighbor's, a goyish, a dustbin, and so on. Never thought of this solution. And here's a very interesting lesson to us. It all sounds very logical. But let me throw back a shayla. What brocha do you make on egg matzahs? It's not at all simple. There's a big machlokes. Some say you make hamotzi, and some say you make boire b'zoynes, and some say you make boire b'zoynes the whole year, but erev Shabbos of Pesach, since you use it as a substitute for bread, you should make hamotzi. So it's maybe much easier from the chometz perspective, but it creates nice shilas of what brocha do you make? Do you bench? Do you say alamichyo? So what shows you is follow the tradition of your fathers and grandfathers. You may think that you have got a new innovation which bypasses various problems, but sooner or later you're liable to find that it creates new ones. So I mean, in our observation of Yiddishkeit, besoires of the fathers, V'al tishkach Torah semecho is a mainstay of our observations. So I would say, yes, if somebody is not worried about brocha to make, he can rely on Reb Moshe Feinstein, who says you can make a moitzi and he can use the egg matzah without fearing any crumbs at all. I would not advise it. I would say, do what your grandfather did. And if you've got, we're probably going to be asked what to do with any remnants of the chometz, deal with it. It may be a bit inconvenient, but this inconvenience is part of the Pesach preparation. Next, please.
You're on mute, Rabbi Cohen. You're muted.
You're muted, Rabbi.
Thank you. Analog watches. So obviously we have a new problem, a new challenge this year with the clocks going forward. What's the deal with changing analog watches and clocks on Shabbos?
Okay. Actually, here we've got to go back to the museum, because we're talking now. There are two kinds of analog watches. You may have analog watches, old-fashioned spring automatic analog watches, and you've got the modern ones, which are actually battery-driven and the analog. So the problem is a twofold one. As far as the old-fashioned watches are concerned, it was deemed that putting the right time on them is creating boine, is creating omakebe patish, is creating a new utensil, because the utensil or the item is useless unless it shows the right time. And therefore, by putting the clock on the right time is deemed to be a makebe patish. These are the old opinions going back to the mechanical analog watches. On the electronic analog watch is the bigger problem, because in order to adjust it, you've got to pull out the mechanism there, the handle or whatever. By pulling it out, it stops the battery. As you see there, the second hand stops. You adjust the time, and then you push it back on, so it switches on the battery. So apart from having the shaila of tikkun mode, or creating a perfect utensil or a perfect implement by putting the right time, you've got the problem of disconnecting and then reconnecting the battery. So I say, don't touch it on Pesach. Don't change it. I mean, on Yom Tov. As to how to cope with the change of the clock, my advice is keep the old times till Motzei Yom Tov. But you do have to remember that the Luach time for Motzei Shabbos, for the first night Yom Tov, is the new clock, probably, and you've got to adjust it to the old clock. So you've got to keep your wits about. But best is leave alone and you change to summertime on Motzei, second day Pesach.
Thank you. Someone who's isolating on Yom Tov, they can't go to shul. What would they do about saying Mashiv Ruach? Would they still say it in their silent Amida of Musaf or on the first day Yom Tov, or would they wait?
I mean, traditionally, again, there are various opinions on that. And the perceived halacha is that if he davens after the chazan in shul has already said Mashiv Ruach Emor LaGoshem, he should say as well Mashiv Ruach Emor LaGoshem. Before then, he should not say Mashu V'Rachmod HaGoshem, and if he done Musaf earlier, he would say without it, and he would wait till Mincha then to say Mashu V'Rachmod HaGoshem. But ideally, calculate when is the time the chazan of the community has now started saying Musaf, and as soon as he announced Mashu V'Rachmod HaGoshem, the whole community, whether present or elsewhere, I got to join it. It's not such a great shaila, because even in saying in winter, Mashu V'Ruach Emored Atol, you're still yoitzer. So, but nonetheless, that's what you do. Wait till the chazan said it in shul, or roughly estimate as to when the chazan says it in shul, and then you can join and say Mashu V'Ruach HaGoshem.
Thank you. Back to Erev Pesach. What do I do with the leftover challah from Shabbos Erev Pesach?
And I'll tell you what you do. Ideally, there should be no leftover challah. Make sure that it's eaten. And rather be short of challah. And you can buy special little kezesim lech. Rather be short of challah, and rather than they have leftovers. If you've got leftovers, there are two ways of disposing it. A place where you've got an eruv, and you can go out of your front door and go to a neighbor, and you've got a goyish neighbor, you can arrange with a goyish neighbor, ask him permission beforehand, and say, look here, we have got really beforehand, you probably dispose of your surplus beers and half a bottle of whiskey to that neighbor, and he knows year in and year out, he's already looking for Pesach because he's got extra booze for free. So you tell him, look here, John or Alan or whatever his name, my guy is Alan, look here, we have Erev Pesach, we Jews, we mustn't keep any leaving on our promises. Do you mind if I pop into your front garden and I put whatever remnants of bread in your dustbin? Is that okay with you? If he says okay, Samachai. If not, and again everybody's in a roof, best thing is to go out, go to the gutter at the end of at the side of the pavement and put it in, also kosher. If you're a place where there's no eruv, Rabbi Bank says for the time being, not got an eruv, and you cannot carry anything out, so they use the traditional method. You flush it down the toilet. It's not a very happy experience, because according to local tradition, one has got to pay great respects to food. Bizu oichlim, in Bizu Pas is a big avera, because it shows you don't show no gratitude for a Bonish's blessing in giving us food. But when is Bali or Bali Mose, there's no Eitzah. So this is the best way, when short of putting it in the goyish dustbin, and short of putting it in the gutter, you put it down the toilet, and flush it, and you yoitze the beer chomets.
Thank you. I just put in the chat, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to private message me or to put your hand up soon. We're going to take one or two more questions I'm going to read, and then perhaps we can, you're welcome to ask those to the Dayan. A question we've been asked a couple of times, Dayan Berger, is last year there was a list of essential foods that didn't need a hechsher for Pesach, like eggs and sugar and raw meat that didn't need a kosher Pesach hechsher. Can we still use that list this year? And what does that list include? Things that we can buy even without a kosher Pesach hechsher.
Let me first explain. If you can buy things without hechsher, so what's the need of hechsher altogether? Why do Beth Dins and rabbinets go to great lengths to send mashgichim to check on tea, to check on sugar, to check on instant coffee, if it's good without hechsher? So why spend the time, the energy, and why charge the public extra? It's expensive. Why charge it if it's good without? I've had this controversy going back 40 odd years with a gentleman, not many people remember him. It was Rabbi Dr. Louis Jacobs, and actually on the pages of the Chronicle of those days. And let me tell you what the clear answer is. You may well have sugar. Tater lime sugar is, provided it's made in England, not in some of Southeast Asia, is pure sugar, and there is no chashash of chometz, no fear of chometz. Same applies to Nescafe, pure Nescafe of Nescafe or of Maxwell House. It's pure. It doesn't. There's no chashash of chometz. However, there may be other brands, and there are other brands, which are somewhat cheaper, and one can't be so sure. For instance, somebody bought pure vegetable oil of a very cheap brand, and it subsequently transpired that they use recycled oil. What they do is they go to restaurants and McDonald's, and all these people are meant to dispose of the oil. You don't throw it into the water system because it's capable of contaminating the water. So what do? They go to special firms, come with lorries and containers and suck out all their oil. They take it to a refinery and they purify it and recirculate. It's called recirculated oil. And it's treifa because you fry shrimps in it and you fry this. Purifying does not kasher. You cannot kasher oil. So you've got one example, and people are tearing their hair out. We had a case of sugar, which we thought perfectly okay, and it contained recycled sugar. Various sweets and items which were no longer consumed, you return it back. It's a shame to throw them out. Manufacturers of various, which contain chometz, proper chometz, brought them back to the factory, they rendered them and produced sugar which wasn't pure sugar. There may be pure sugar in their terms, but in our terms it's chometz. And so on, some other horror stories. You had coffee, add a bit of chicory and a bit of wheat as well, the cheaper brands. So therefore our sages, not going back that long, but going back long enough, had instituted that you don't buy any manufactured goods on Pesach other with a hechsher. But it does not mean that if it hasn't got a hechsher and it's a good, reputable brand that is chometz, chas v'sholem, it's not so. But once you get used to buying goyish items without hechsher, and you rely on the reputable firm and not a reputable firm, and who is to certify what is reputable and what is not reputable, you're liable to end up with chometz. Hence has been a takone. It's a kind of a custom, a commonly accepted custom, that you don't buy manufactured goods other than with hechsher. And that's the purpose of the hechsher, to ensure and to educate the community that you don't go and rely on your own views on it. However, since it's not a shaila of chometz, it's a shaila of adhering to a minhag, an enactment which has been enacted by famous rabbis over a century or two. So this can be set aside in time of need. So there was last year there was a problem of sending mashgichim to supervise various items, or there was one other problem in bishas hatchak, meaning a time of need. You can do away with that custom and then use, provided it's pure and it's reputable and it meets all the criteria, you can use it and there's no chashash of chometz. I don't know what the situation. So therefore, the question is, at what stage do you set aside the custom? It's not a shaila of chometz. It's a shaila of custom, which was instituted to prevent the occurrence of chometz. People don't realize how easy it is to make mistakes. When we started Rakuzens, I was one who started Rakuzens. Rakuzens was chazet treif, was chometz, going back in the old years. And I don't remember what year it was. It must have been the early 80s. Rakuzens was bought over by I forgot the name of the company, and they wanted to obtain the hechsher of the Landenbesen. I was at the time at the Landenbesen. We climbed up the silos. We did, Baruch Hashem, we made it for machine masters. It was Behuda. But they insisted on having masters for the whole year round. So I said, okay, but the all year round masters were not kosher Pesach. They were proper chometz. So we said, okay, let's have kosher Pesach masters. And the other one say clearly, chometz not for Passover use, and that's okay. The first year after that happened, I got in London, Shilas, people wailing and crying. I bought matzahs. I didn't realize it says chometz, not Pesach Pesach. I put the matzah meal, I put it into the fried fish, I put it there. What shall I do? So I'm going to see clear, kosher, not for Passover. Rabbi, we didn't realize, what shall we do? So anyway, next year we had different colors. They were, but a big fight with them. They said, in order for the brand to be recognized, it's got to be the same color throughout the year. So look here, you want the hechsher or brand recognition? We're not going to do it again. That's it. One has got to be blue and one has got to be red. At that time, I don't know what it is now. And even then, people made mistakes. So now, once you've got this experience, so once you say, look here, coffee, instant coffee, kosher la Pesach. So you go to these shady 7-11 stores or 7-24 stores or whatever they're called, 7-11 stores, or other brands, other shops, and they sell you cheaper makes from Far East, from somewhere else. It says on it, kosher, and I tell you from my own experience, it's chometz. They add chometz in order to bulk it, in order to do that. Well, and it says pure grain coffee. It's not pure. And that's hence the enactment, which says that the corner is absolutely valid for good reason, to prevent people. Some people say, well, the rabbis want to line their pockets. Believe you me, there's no lining of pockets, mostly a loss-making arrangement. But it is there to serve the community and to ensure they celebrate a proper kosher Pesach. Now, this year, I don't know what the situation is. If there's abundance of items with hechsherim, carry on the old-fashioned way. Look for a hechsher. It costs a few pounds, and the Rebbe Shem is going to repay it. Rebbe Shem gives a fee, gives an amount as the budget for each person of Rosh Hashanah. But there's an exception. Any expenses concerns with Shabbos and Yom Tov, and schar limud for his children, and tuition fee for the children, call a moisif. Anybody that adds to those expenses gets rewarded in a bigger bonus. So I say, if there's an abundance of these items this year, carry on and look for it. If there isn't, you should not spoil your Yom Tov. Why not? And you can use coffees, good big branded Maxwell House, or make sure that it's pure coffee and not with all additives. There could be additives. Very difficult to tell a layman. And that's what the hechsher is all there. But pure, ordinary Nescafe, ordinary Maxwell House, I don't know, this is some Dutch company, also a highly reputable company, is kosher la Pesach. Sugar, either sugar, cube sugar, or other sugar by Tate and Lyle. I don't know which other company does it. Used to be British Sugar, but I think it's been taken over Tate and Lyle. Fine. Any lesser brands, I can't guarantee it. Any other items? Did someone wants to ask me about it being kosher Pesach? By all means, do it.
Thank you. What about dishwashers? What does the Dayan say? How do we kasher a dishwasher?
In my opinion, you can't kasher a dishwasher.
Right.
Pesach. You can't, and you can't do it. So if you don't want to sit Pesach and wash all your dishes, you know what you do? You can buy plastic plates and even plastic forks. Baruch Hashem, that's what it's all about. And if you want it to look a bit nicer, you can buy more expensive plastic forks. They've got beautiful designs, and they pass off as porcelain. Really beautiful one. Okay, they cost a bit more, and you save yourself washing. But in my opinion, you cannot kasher unless you want to take it apart and be unable to reassemble it. You can't use it.
Thank you. One more question just before I open up to the floor. Can we kasher a porcelain set, a tea set, which hasn't been used in a few years?
Now, porcelain sets, according to some poskim, regarded as glass. And we in the Ashkenazim don't kasher even glass for Pesach, but only glass that had been used hot. Glass that has been used hot, one does kasher for Pesach by immersing it in water for 24 hours, 3 times 24 hours. It's a mess. The same formula can be applied to porcelain, even though some others say you can't cash it, but it can be, because there is an opinion that once an item has not been used for 12 months, it's deemed to be kosher Pesach anyway, provided it's utterly clean. So yes, an expensive porcelain set, particularly one that has sentimental value because Boba used it in the night of the Seder, and you remember as a young child that Boba served after the Seder, served coffee in that. It brings you memories. It Vigato lebincho, you remember the customs, and it is not possible. Yes, I would be lenient on those exceptional circumstances. Other than that, one can Baruch Hashem afford in today's climate, unless one is never very, very poor, one can afford to buy a set of cups, whether glass ones or the porcelain ones. You can buy them in IKEA, you can buy them in Argus, for literally in current value, literally in terms of pennies. And the Gemara says about knives, you that can afford, buy new ones. If you can't afford, you've got to stoop down to kasher. Nowadays, the art of kashering sauces has almost died. Because Baruch Hashem, people can afford to buy new utensils, can afford to buy new cutlery and crockery. It is relatively very cheap, mass-produced and very cheap. So let's follow the Gemara. You can afford it, buy new one. Now, next one.
Thank you. I'll take the first question. Shimon, if I can highlight you for a second. You've got to unmute yourself. There we go.
Am I unmuted now?
Yeah,
Can you
we
hear
can
me?
hear you.
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, thank you, Dan. I'd like to ask a question because I heard once, first of all, I think that the role of rabbi should be to make observance easier for people rather than harder. And I heard in a talk once that a famous rabbi called Rabbi Yaakov Emden said that people should be allowed to have kitnias on Pesach because if anything's going to be comets, it's not going to be Heinz baked beans or something like that. It's going to be matzah that's not baked properly. And that seems to be very logical as far as I'm concerned. So I was wondered why he was opposed on that.
I'll tell you why he was opposed. First of all, he was opposed because more or less around that time, potatoes became prevalent. So instead of having kidneys, you could have potato. Kidneys, what they primarily meant was rice, not so much beans as rice and maize, which served as alternative to wheat. And since the prevalence of potatoes, so his ruling became a little obsolete. That's number one. Number two is the simple question: how much do you put by tradition? This tradition of kidneys goes back by us Ashkenazim almost a millennia. And these Chachomim who forbade us to eat kidneys were as concerned about chometz as was Rabbi Yaakov Emden. And they nonetheless believed that it's better to forbid kidneys and deal with matzah, deal the problems of matzah. It's very difficult to one in later generations to come up with a new invention. But the true answer is, it is now that we have got alternatives. We have got potatoes, which fill in the role of rice and others. We have got some other grains, grain-likes. I forgot what they're called in American grain, canola, or that, I forgot what it is. A dispute as to whether you keep this or not. It is not necessary. I can only tell Mr. Shimonov that my Zaydas ate throughout Pesach two kezesim the first night of matzahs, two kezesim the second night of matzahs, and Shabbos Chol HaMoed are kezayis by night and kezayis by day. They try to not to eat matzahs because of the chashash of chometz, as Mr. Shimonov says. And they didn't go hungry. They ate potatoes, they ate eggs. My Baba used to make a tart out of carrots. I don't know how she did it, but it was famous throughout Vienna. She grated carrots, and ich weiß nicht what she did. And she made a tart. It was the talk with a bit of nuts put in. Ich weiß nicht. It was the talk of the town. Begin to Chanetze, and we've got this tradition. I'll tell you something of great interest. I met some years ago, actually, Shabbos Agodl it was, in London. I met a Rov, a very respectable Rov, a Sephardi Rov from Chicago, who was on the way, he was in London for grandson's bar mitzvah, which I also participated, and he was then following to Eretz Yisrael to retire in Eretz Yisrael. He was Turkish. Originally, he was born in Chicago, but he was stemmed from Turkey. So I asked him about the Minhagim, a fine learned man, a gentleman of the first water. Burgas. He came from the city of Burgas, I remember now. So I asked him, what is your minhag on Kitnius? So our minhag in Burgas, which we have adopted and followed even to Chicago, is we eat all Kitnius except rice. I said, well, what's the logic of that? They said to me, quite simple. Where did we buy rice? We didn't have, in Burgas, we didn't have pre-packed rice. You went to the market and you bought rice. There were grain stands, and the grain and a stand in the market sold grains, sold rice, sold wheat, sold flour, sold barley, and used to use the same ladle to measure grains and to measure wheat and to measure flour and to measure rice. And people came back home with the rice full of flour. So we made it takana in Burgas, no rice for Pesach. Moroccan Jews do eat rice. You've got various minhagim which are adjusted and adjusted to the local conditions. I'll tell you something. Me, my father, Olav Sholem, my father-in-law, Olav Sholem, my Zayda, my mama, don't eat garlic on Pesach. We cook throughout Pesach without garlic. What's wrong with garlic? Indeed, the Pre-Pesach, one of the great halachic authorities, said the minhag is you don't cook with garlic. Ve'eni yodei alama. I don't know why not. So I heard the reason that the garlic used to be sown at the margin of the cornfield. It was a little margin, a piece of land which wasn't properly square. It was difficult to till it properly. It was a corner, an awkward corner. So a little plot used to sow garlic. And then after the harvest of the wheat, the land was full of corn, at that time we didn't have proper covered harvesters, it was all over. And then you collected the garlic, you stored it for Pesach, you open it up, full of chometz, full of those. So they made it takona, no garlic. I've got one son-in-law who used to come to us for Pesach, and he drove my wife Meshuggah, who wouldn't eat any fish. No fish. So we had to make him an alternative to fish. And investigated. Why no fish? Because he came from a community which wasn't near a river. There was no river in that little village. The river was a few miles down the road. And the fishermen, caught the fish in the river, brought it to the Jews for Shabbos and for Pesach. They paid good money for it. But in order to keep it alive, they used to take a piece of bread, dip it in pure alcohol, and put it in the mouth of the fish, which apparently kept him alive longer than otherwise. And you got a fish for Pesach, you put it, cleaned it, put it those, you take it out, a piece of chometz is going around. So made it takona in that village, no chometz. And this shows you how all these minhagim in all these things evolved. Some people laugh at it today. It's so much out of date. And I laugh back on those people. And I say to those people, religion is not logic. Particularly keeping of religion. Al titosh Torah semecha. Don't break the tradition of your home. Is a much more, the Shulchan Aruch is far from as influential as is the custom of home. Custom of home, first of all, brings certainty, brings the element of continuity, and brings the element of identifying with your roots and the element of pride in the mitzvahs. I'm doing it like my grandfather did. This is a sense of identity. People in the modern world don't realize how important it is to the mental well-being of individuals. And a mitzvah you do, and you say, I'm following in my grandfather's footsteps. This is how he did the Seder. And this is how he did it. I'll give you an example. There's a mizmor in end of Seder. We sing Kiloi Noah, Kiloi Yoah, one of the, at the end of the Seder. I'm sure it's got in the English Haggadah as well. Kiloi Noah, Kiloi Yoah. And we have got a minhag in our family, my father's family, we say Kiloi Noah, Kiloi Yoah, Keser Malucha. We end with the words Keser Malucha. Didn't make much of it. I had my registrar in the London based in, David Fries of Zangesund. And once we had a little discussion, and he said, you know, Dayan, my father, La Sholem, when he would say the Kiloi Noah, Keser Malucha. So I said to him, he can speak Yiddish a bit. So I said to him, David, this is one of ours. Yes, that's how we say it. And I didn't know where from. Some 2 or 3 years ago, I went to America to celebrate the Pesach with my children. And one of my children had a Haggadah of sons. Haggadah printed in Natanya, Ikiret sons. There's God there, Kiloi Noah, Kiloi Yoah, Keser Malucha. I couldn't stop myself. It was Motzeh, second night Yom Tov. It was Chol HaMoed. It was a Shaila Koisa B'Chol HaMoed, not Koisa B'Chol HaMoed. I took a photo, Motzeh Yom Tov, even though it was Chol HaMoed, because I deemed it not to be a Maloche. It's Tzorech Yom Tov. Took a photo of that passage, Kiloi Noah, Kiloi Yoah, Keser Malucha, attached it by email to David Fry. He called me back. He said, what a simcha. Yes, we are also from Samzach Sidim. He gave him, and each Erev Pesach, when they call him David, and I wish him Davidl, a kosher, realistic, freilich of Pesach, he comes from a shtetl. His father came from a shtetl about 20 kilometers from my father's shtetl. We are related. So Davidl, and remember, Kiloi Noah, Kiloi Yoah, Keser Malucha. It's like injection of life. Yes, we've got a tradition. We say it's a quirkily, it's a bit of a quirk, but this is our tradition. We followed our footsteps. He gives us a boost. And this is what it means, Al Tito Shteras. Next.
Thank you. Absolutely fascinating. Without further ado, Bernard, you had a question. Let me see if I can highlight you.
Yeah, if I can just ask, what can we and can't we eat for Shalashudas on Erev Pesach?
Shalashudas on Pesach. The question is, when are you going to eat it? You're obviously going to eat in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Afternoon, I'll tell you a menu. But I hope your wife is not going to blame me for it. I can tell you what the menu is for Shalashudas. You start off with a piece of fish.
Okay.
You then ask your wife to serve you a quarter chicken, beautiful quarter chicken, and a whole plate of afters or whatever after she made. You can eat that for Shalashudas without the slightest problem. Sorry, my phone is going here. So okay. That's one way. If you don't want your wife to bless you, you can eat fruit. I don't know when you've got kosher. You'll probably make cakes for Pesach, kosher the Pesach, gabrotka cakes. You can eat a piece of mezonis and a piece of fruit. Also, Yoitze Pesach. And the worst comes to the worst. You can sit and learn a shir, and with Yevon Yoitze b'divrei Torah as well. But you eat shtei Shulchan Aruch, you eat bosor, vedogim, and you eat. You've got to remember you've got to say that in the night. But these Yoitze Shalashudas without any problem at all.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, gentlemen?
Rabbi Simmons.
Okay, so we promised to finish to 8:30, so we're going to try and to work to that timescale. There are some questions that have been submitted that haven't been answered. There haven't been a chance to put. There are 2 questions that we want to be answered particularly, and I'm going to put them in a second. So what we're going to do, if the Dayan agrees, the remaining questions that have not been answered, we will ask you to answer them to us, and we will publish them on the Shul website. So
We'll
people,
do that. The question is, by when? Before Shabbos?
before Pesach, Dayan Berger.
I'm sure before Pesach. But we'll do it before Shabbos, or we'll
After.
check it. We'll do that. No problem.
The two questions we want to answer are both related and important questions for, I think, both of our communities, and they all relate to the second day Yom Tov. So the first question is, I normally go to Israel every Pesach. I've done so for the last 10 years. I have a flat in Netanya where I usually keep 1 day Yom Tov. This year, being in England, do I really have to keep the 2 days? That's the first question. And the second question is reverse. I made Aliyah. I live in Israel, but I have returned this Pesach for legally permitted reasons. Do I have to keep the 2nd and 8th day Yom Tov? And if so, is there anything that I'm permitted to do that I would not be able to do on Yom Tov itself?
Okay. Let me start deal with the first question first, and then we'll deal with the second one, because it's a loaded question. There's got a few items, and we'll have to deal with all of them. As far as the first one is concerned, there is no doubt that the one who goes for every Yom Tov to Eretz Yisrael, but resides here, works here, he was here throughout the Yom Tov, is definitely, when he's here in England, for whatever reason, has definitely got to keep 2 days Yom Tov. And if not, he's an absolute Machala Yom Tov. There are no two ways about it. Literally, no two ways about it. He's Mechuyev to keep 2 days Yom Tov. No question. Second question, I'll answer the second question, then I'll give you a bit of a philosophically, if you like, background on Yom Tov Sheni, and I'll conclude with that. But repeat again, what's the second question? Somebody who genuinely lives in Israel, he comes to England, and what he may do and what he must know. Now, somebody who lives in Israel, somebody who resides normally in Israel, he came here temporarily, he has got the dinim of an Eretz Israelite. What it means is that the second day Yom Tov, he has got to put on film. He has got Motzeh, the first night Yom Tov, he's got to make Havdalah and not Kiddush. He's potter from having a second Seder. He doesn't have to have a second Seder. With one exception, he may not do any work whatsoever, even Betzina. A B'nai Yisrael must not do work on Yom Tov Sheni in Chutz La'aretz, where he is among, where there are exceptions, not dealing with exceptions because they're highly unusual, but where he's in a community of people who observe Yom Tov Sheni, who may not be Poirish Me'atzimah, and may not do any Melocha, afilu Betzina, even Betzina. Now, I just want to speak a few words, and I'll conclude with that, about the whole idea of Yom Tov Sheni. And Yom Tov Sheni, the institution of Yom Tov Sheni, has come to under a lot of flack. And in a way, reasonably so. Because it appears that it is some sort of remnant, of antediluvian remnant. In the past, there was no calendar. So you calculated the times by going to the Beis Din and testifying that you saw the moon, the new moon, at a certain time. And the Beis Din then had to send messengers, and these messengers had a few weeks to go and inform the communities what's the new calendar. They reached some communities, they didn't reach other communities, so they made an action that Chutz La'aretz is deemed to be as if their messengers did not reach them. They weren't sure when Yom Tov is, and therefore you should have a Yom Tov Sheni. And the Gemara says, but nowadays we have got a calendar. The Gemara asks the Kasser, nowadays we have got a calendar. Why do we need to keep Yom Tov Sheni? It's a fixed calendar. We don't need messengers anymore. So the Gemara says, well, Shema Yachzer Adover Lekilkuloi. Maybe the calendar, something will happen, and the calendar will be forgotten. My father, Oliver Sholem, was 5 years in Siberia during the World War, and they never didn't have a calendar. Forgotten. They didn't have. They tried to calculate. People remembered this year is Amleyo, Echasero, double Cheshvan, Yocheshvan. Didn't have a calculator. He said after 5 years, he wasn't a great maven on the Luach. He had a friend who was a bit, from memory, constructed Luach. He said he came out after the war, came back to Poland, spot on. They kept it properly. But it is, you can have the luach be going array or whatever, and hence the takona. So now the people resent it. It's an extra imposition, extra day of Yom Tov. What for? For some archaic, old-fashioned ideas which have long passed the sell-by date. Why keep Yom Tov Sheni? And this has been an argument of Apikosim going back to Rav Saadia Gaon. I'm not going to give a whole lecture, but this is a whole lecture to be given on it. But I'll give you the following idea. We believe the primitive, imperfect way of collecting the calendar was in the olden days when they had to testify and go before Beth Din to testify the new moon. And the perfect way is to have a calendar. But that's not true. We are praying, Mashiach would come, and as soon as Mashiach would come, we revert back to the old system. That's what the Rambam says. So we do away with the calendar, we leave it to Chachomim, and the old way will start again. Why that is so is beyond the scope of tonight. But the truth is that in our view, and for religious, not for astronomical reasons, but for religious reasons, the proper way is Mekadesh Yisrael Vazmanim. God sanctified the Jewish people, and they in turn can sanctify the times. By Shabbos you say Mekadesh Shabbos. By Yom Tov you say Mekadesh Yisrael Vazmanim. The sanctification of the Yom Tovim is through the Beis and through the Yidden who may sanctify themselves, and they're capable of sanctifying. Not going into that area, but beyond that, to say the perfect system is Lekadesh al Pi Ariyah. Says Remeir Simcha, Meshech Chochmah. We always make or celebrate things in order to remind us that Mashiach will come soon. Tike Rav Gamliel, Tzien Ein Doire Sheilo, many enactments to remind us that we're going to back to Yerushalayim, Mashiach will come, and Oimer is also, and this is also going back to Shas. He says part of the reason for Yom Tov Sheni is to remind us the perfect system in the halacha is not a calendar. The perfect system is Lekadesh al Pi Ariyah, and we yearn for that system to come back again. It's a system in a Emunah in Bias HaMashiach. So some Israelis, Zionists, object to Yom Tov Sheni because it's a golus, it's sourced in golus, and it's unfit for the modern day in the state of Israel. The gentlemen, you don't know. We celebrate Eretz Yisrael by keeping two Yom Tov Sheni golus because we yearn, show a yearning for the system of a Shiva Shoftayich Kevarishona v'Yitzayich Kevatchila to return. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to impose. I don't like people to waste my time, and I don't want to waste anybody else's time. We'll do as Rabbi Simmons, Rabbi Cohen said, we conclude at 8:30, and we conclude by wishing you the warmest Chag, Kosher v'Sameach. May you enjoy the Yom Tov in the way we are permitted by law. I just want to mention here, we ought to be most grateful to our government who looked after us by enacting wise safeguards in distancing, in lockdown, in lockup. They saved many, many lives, and they obtained immunizations and vaccines for us. Europe is struggling, and our Prime Minister, nimble as he is, got us vaccines. Baruch Hashem, the rates are falling. We should abide by all government guidelines. We shouldn't break any laws at all. And within that, we should celebrate a Chag, Kosher v'Sameach. Join with your family where it's permitted. If you can't join them physically, join them spiritually. And we should be Zoiche, please God. Next year, I'm confident that that's going to be the case. That's part of my 86 track record. Confident that we're going to celebrate. Remember the last years, we laugh and we nostalgia and we celebrate soon. And we Zoiche, the Bias Goel Tzedek, V'Mheira B'Yameinu Omen. A kosher and happy Pesach to all. And good night.
Dan Berger,
Good
hold on a second. Rabbi Banks wants to just say a few words.
Yes, the Baal Simcha, he's entitled, yes.
Well, we just wanted to thank you on behalf of everyone from Steen Court, Yeshurun, and Yavne College who are also participating in this event tonight. Vishinantam levanecha, I just had a son, so those words are ringing in my head. But that's what Shinon is, that the words of Torah are coming from your mouth.
Yosef, that's wonderful. You say you have got a son and you already love him and cherish him because you realize that you're going to fulfill the mitzvah.
But that's what we saw tonight, is that the words of Torah just from Shinon, from Shen, are coming out your mouth. It's mind-blowing to see your encyclopedic knowledge of halacha.
Thank you.
We really appreciate
and
it.
And again, wish you again, you and your wife, good health and mazel tov and nachas from the little one. It may give you much joy through learning and doing mitzvahs and ma'asim tovim. And as I said, stand you and your wife in good health under the chuppah, and please God, let the generations carry on and on. Ad biata Mashiach.
Oh man, I'm not sure where the Dayan got 86 from, but I looked up gematrias of 86. So apparently gematria of 86 is Elokim. So you've definitely got the Var Elokim, V'ficha. But more than that, it's Ahavat Chesed, which
Beautiful.
I think really resonates from
gematria.
what you said to us.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you all very much. I'm missing you all and hope that we're going to join face-to-face Bekarov. Kosher and happy Pesach. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Rabbi Bang. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Thank you for arranging it, the various Rabbonim. Thank you very much. An absolutely beautiful and amazing event. We should do it more often. It doesn't need to be on a particular Yom Tov, but it can be an Indian. Getting something like Dayan Berger is absolutely a wonderful experience to hear him.
Good. Okay.
Thank you, Anthony.
Everybody. Have a good Yom Tov. Thank you.
Thank you.